Accessing library computer data.
And to make sure that history never forgets the name Enterprise.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Pensky Podcast. If you haven't tuned in before, this is a podcast where we are running through all 178 episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, giving our thoughts and feelings about each and every one. Right now we're up to episode 21 of season 3. This one's called Hollow Pursuits. It was directed by Cliff Bole, written by Sally Caves, and it aired back on April 3rd, 1990. In this episode, the holodeck fantasy life of a crewman aboard the Federation starship USS Enterprise interferes with his inability to deal with malfunctions which threaten the ship. This one's the introduction of Mr. Barclay, so we're very excited for that. We're going to have Sean and Clay stop by to talk about this one. We're going to get right into it right after this break.
I wouldn't bother you with something that's minor, Commander, but it may be a symptom of a more serious problem.
Do you think we'll need to put into a starbase?
We'll have a better idea after Mr. Barclay runs a check on the power systems.
It was Lieutenant Barclay who first suggested a link between the two incidents. But no, it wasn't. I mean, not really.
Will your investigation affect our available power during the mission?
No, sir. We'll have to shut off some systems. We'll shut them down a few at a time. It shouldn't. I don't think so.
Good. I look forward to your report, Mr. Broccoli. Barclay.
If you will excuse me. Metathesis is one of the most common of pronunciation errors, sir. A reversal of vowel and consonant. Bark to Brock.
So, a little bit of information. This is the first episode that I watched my newly minted Blu-rays on. And on the Blu-ray level, they give you the option. You can just play the episode, or you can play the episode with like the 90s promo. So like the commercial they would play in the 15 minutes before the show saying, on Star Trek, The Next Generation. This one's interesting because they don't mention Barclay at all in the promo, and they only focus on the ship going way too fast at the end. And I just thought that was funny. They mention nothing about the holodeck. They mention nothing about anything. They just say the ship is going too fast and it's going to fall apart, which is funny because that's the last 5 minutes of the show and nothing else. But I just wanted to start off with that random tidbit. We are going to be talking about Hollow Pursuits. I'm joined by Sean. Sean, how are you?
Hey, how you doing, Wes?
Good. And Clay. Clay, how are you?
I'm good. I have to sell Barclay a lock for the holodeck door, I think. But aside from that,
yeah, it's a problem. I can understand Riker being able to open the door. I don't think Geordi should just be able to walk in on somebody.
Well, is that just how it works? Can anybody just walk into the holodeck? Because let's be completely honest. There's some weird shit going on in that holodeck, and you got to have privacy for that stuff.
Well, you'd at least think that the program would like alert the person in there that someone came in the door.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
they don't actually. It's implied that Riker's pretty much in there creating Jackson Pollock paintings every night, right?
Yeah. Matter is energy, and energy is matter.
Well, I don't think so, because Riker clearly has his pick of the ladies on the ship.
Yeah, he's no Barclay. Although
I like how there's like 3 ladies, and Barclay had sexual fantasies about 2 of them, but not Guinan. Hello.
No. Well, he seemed to replace Guinan with Wesley in a sort of bizarre fetish twist, I guess. But we'll get into that. But yeah, if people aren't aware, we're talking about Hollow Pursuits, which is the first appearance of Reginald Broccoli Barclay, who is going to become a recurring guest star, played by the A-Team's Dwight Schultz. He's sort of a character that I don't think he's super popular with fans, but he's something. So anyway, this one deals with his holodeck addiction, how it impacts his job, and then he sort of saves the day at the end of the show because that's how TNG works. So, guys, did you remember anything about this one? Do you have any overall thoughts about Hollow Pursuits?
I've always really liked this one, and I've always was really impressed by the actor who plays him, because you don't get to see his acting chops so much in this one, although he's pretty good. But in a later season, he's uploaded with all this alien information, and he upgrades the ship and takes the ship on this crazy adventure. and you can really see a good variety of acting from this guy. Like, he seems to be as good as Picard, or Patrick Stewart in some cases.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's good in this one. He's got to play. He switches between, it's sort of cheesy, but he switches between like his holodeck persona and then his sort of nebbish persona.
Right.
Which is good. Clay, what'd you think for a rough impression?
I thought he was great. I thought the stuff, I thought he was laying it on a little thick outside. I mean, it's interesting to say that, but he was laying it on a little thick with the regular on the ship persona. But it really surprised me when he got into the more flamboyant stuff. I wasn't expecting that. I thought he was great.
Yep.
My one big critique, I think, is that I don't think they pushed his thing far enough as in terms of I mean, we'll probably get into it later. I think the holodeck addiction thing should have played into the overall end of the story a little bit more.
Yeah. I can see that. They don't even really imply that he has a holo addiction besides Geordi just kind of mentioning it offhand.
Yeah, mentioning it offhand in a way that means clearly it's a thing that already exists.
Yeah, right. Which makes sense.
I mean, also, to be honest, most of the people on that ship would spend most of their time on the holodeck.
Yeah,
nobody would ever be in 10 forward. They would always be in line waiting for the holodeck.
Yeah, so we should get into that. I think that's like the big thing about this. But I just wanted to say that we just watched Tin Man last week, and I think this is everything I sort of had a problem with Tin Man is kind of fixed in this one, including. This is how you play a character who's supposed to be somewhat awkward and annoying in a not annoying way.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he's supposed to be awkward, but he doesn't grate on you. Like the performance isn't like, Jesus, will this guy just shut up or pull it together? Like he's he's still charming when he's his sort of annoying little self.
Right.
Yeah. Do you think that they knew what they had when they, to throw out a word like holodeck addiction is one thing, but they don't really explore that fully until they even get to Voyager, and they're still exploring it. And it's an amazing idea. I feel like they struck gold way before they were ready to know what to do with it in a way.
Yeah, I feel like they skipped it because they were stuck in the Next Generation sort of ethos, because Geordi has a conversation when, like the first time he walks in on him and they go to 10 forward and they talk about it.
Right.
Geordi's like, it's very unusual to recreate people you know. And I'm sitting there going, are you kidding me? Like, that's all people would do, I think.
Yeah.
In real life. Like, they'd only, they'd create all the people that they want to have sex with. They'd have sex with celebrities. They'd have sex with, like, everybody that, like, got away from them. And then they'd probably fight their friends and stuff like that.
So this would be, so if Clay was on the ship, he'd basically be having, like, a three-way between Kurt Russell and the Highlander every single day.
You mean a three-way fight?
Yeah.
Sean, you mean like a three-way sword fight is what you're saying?
Exactly.
Did anyone catch do you think they intended to have the little Riker say, have we crossed swords before when he's talked to Riker? That seems so too perfect, I think, in some ways. But
there was a joke about a booby trap too, and I think dealing with something about Troi. There was a joke about a booby trap. I'm not so sure that was intended to be funny, but I laughed.
Just didn't land. Yeah, this I wouldn't call this episode funny. I think it tries to be funny, but it's funny in a way that doesn't bother me as much as it's just not funny.
It's not.
Right.
It's not like. Well, I don't know. It's got some decent funny moments, like when Picard mistakenly calls him Barclay. I bought that. I thought that was good because his overselling of being helpful. Picard's overselling of being like enthusiastic and helpful was really good.
Yeah, he set it up so well in his office. He's like, no, let's not transfer him. Let's do the Star Trek thing. Let's be inclusive. And he really made a big deal out of it.
It continues one of my favorite Picard things, which is hardly ever mentioned, of how he's fairly awkward with officers who aren't senior staff.
Right.
Like he's always sort of. I always wonder, like, he's highly regarded in like Trek canon, But if you were serving on the ship, would you be like, he was kind of a dick? Like he never really talked to me. It was never really friendly or anything like that.
Well, the thing about that moment that actually struck me while I was watching it is, at first I thought, wow, Patrick Stewart's landing on really thick, like really being like, yeah, I'm trying to be overly enthusiastic. But then I realized, wait, no, that's what Picard would be doing. Yeah, like because he doesn't know how to talk to these people.
Right.
So
he needs Geordi to do it.
Right. He would seem fake in his level of over enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So it's actually really, really good acting on
it's the same
Patrick
thing.
Stewart.
When he's talking to kids, he's often sort of doing the same thing, just kind of going through the script, but you can tell he's uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah. Just it's uncomfortable, like small talk that he's having with everybody.
What did you guys?
Yeah.
What did you guys think of Wesley's role in this episode?
It was probably the right amount of Wesley that I can take.
Yeah. But also, let's be honest, if there's anyone who should be having a holodeck addiction, having fantasies about the women on the ship, it's probably the teenager on the ship.
Well,
maybe they should have focused on him.
He was eating a lot of pie, if you know what I'm saying, on that holodeck.
You mean literally?
He was literally eating some pie. I think they dressed him up as Little Boy Blue, and they implied that Barclay had been spanking him, which was just a fascinating turn of events. So,
why was he that character? Why was he of that painting? I don't get that reference.
I don't get the reference either. There's a couple. It's sort of a running joke on this I've had with I think you guys and Modi and everything about how a lot of the next gen episodes are titled poorly, to the point where I think I'm missing the reference that they're making, but then I obviously am not. They're just not very good. It's easy to see in all the Q episodes. It's like they just stick Q into a random phrase that has nothing to do with anything.
Like Q and I, between Q and I.
Like the Borg one is called Deja Q. There's nothing about deja vu in that episode.
Yeah, that's...
So it's kind of the same thing here. I feel like they have things they're going for.
Q are so beautiful to me.
Q are so beautiful. Q2. Like the little boy Blue, I feel like they're just randomly sticking something. I feel like they missed a big opportunity by only giving him the nickname Broccoli. I feel like you could have...
In what's... Missed an opportunity in what sense?
Because it's not a good enough joke. It's like... If he didn't understand what broccoli meant and Captain Picard said it, you could almost pass it off as just like, oh, that was weird. It's not like you called him like weird nebbish guy, or something like that.
Or Fartley.
Right. Or anything like that. It's just it's too weird and like unrelated of a nickname to what his problem is.
They should have just called him Shithead.
Right. That was the first draft of the script. So Shithead walks in. Yeah,
I'm surprised that Wesley was allowed to joke around about an officer.
That's true.
Clearly outranks him, and then even Geordi, while they're having their moment in the bar, is still talking about his concerns about Barclay, who is an officer. And Wes should not have been included in that. I mean, that was totally unprofessional of Geordi to do that.
Well,
you're just trying to further your agenda of Geordi sucks.
They managed to make someone who sucked. They tried to make it so that, this guy Barclay, well, he's worse than Geordi and Wes. But at the end, I feel like, no, I'd still rather hang out with Barclay.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Like, did you think that in the intro scene where after Barclay gets called in and Geordi and Riker want to talk to him, Geordi and Riker are like the angriest that this show has ever been. And it almost feels undeserved at a certain point.
Yeah. I mean, come on, Riker's mad because Barclay's looking at holo porn when he should be at work. Well, you're telling me you've never been late, Riker?
Jordy goes, I don't want to hear it. When Barclay's trying to give him the excuse, and it's like, wow.
Riker's never been late, but the people Riker's with are constantly late.
Everyone else comes early. Riker arrives late.
That was why I was hoping they were going to push it further, because I actually if you get down to what Barclay actually does, he's just kind of late, and he doesn't speak very well. That's about it.
Yeah.
I thought he's
made it surprisingly far as an officer.
Right. But I was expecting his addiction. I mean, I don't even know if you'd really call it an addiction the way they put it. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, he has an addiction to the holodeck.
Sure.
Right. I was expecting it to be much more intrusive on the stuff that he had on his work. There's only one time really where he straight up misses his assignment.
And it's because he had been working so long beforehand that he fell asleep. Yeah.
Right. He could have fallen asleep in his quarters and it would have been the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I liked how they. Sorry, go ahead, Wes.
No, Sean, go ahead.
I was gonna say I liked how they finally had a character that didn't fit into the ship.
Yes.
That whole you were talking, Wes, about the opening that you watched on your Blu-ray, and it has like a little synopsis. I feel like it should have been like
those Blu-rays.
Have you ever felt like you didn't fit in? Well, guess what? There's a member of the crew who also feels like he doesn't fit in.
Right. It's not the sexiest sort of promo to cut with like your movie trailer voice guy. But
this week on Star Trek, there's a weirdo on the ship, just like you.
A bunch of losers watch this show, so here's the loser for you. We wrote him into the show.
Yeah, like, hey, I think that's why people were so upset. Like, hey, that's hitting too close to home.
That's actually what criticism was. That they thought the show was taking pot shots at their audience.
Really?
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah. That's ridiculous.
The show denies it, but I mean, I don't get that intention from them. I think he's just kind of an interesting character to bring onto the show.
Yeah, he's definitely the most animated human they've had.
Yep.
Usually the people they have on that are humans are relatively stuffy. So he really did stand out as a character that hasn't quite been on the show before.
That's always been like my wife's big thing with Star Trek is everyone sounds so stuffy. But she loves Barclay and she likes Troy's mom because they just seem very, very human, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that. While I was showing off my Blu-rays that I bought, I was showing my wife trying to justify why I spent this money on this when I can just stream them on the internet. And I showed her the gag reel, and we were watching the gag reel, and it's funny that even the gag reel is like the most harmless shit you've ever seen. Like most gag reels are like the actor's like, fuck, I can't get my line or something.
Yeah.
This one, it's so lighthearted. It's like they're just like they like say like disruptors instead of shields, and they all start laughing, and my wife is like, even the bloopers are like very like next generation. It's like, I don't know what to tell
that's
you.
because they can't see Roddenberry and Berman doing coke off the main console off the screen.
You can in the Blu-ray definition. It's high definition. High definition.
I heard they had to go back in and digitally remove coke splatter from Geordi's nose in this episode.
They had to get all their pinky nails like edited down. They were very long.
The cocaine especially shows up on Geordi.
Yeah. It does.
Oh, come on, shit.
But anyway, I think this episode is kind of underrated. In a way, I think it's really important in that it brings in this Barclay character who is fitting that we just watched the documentary, totally a troubled character that the show has not done successfully yet.
Yeah.
And it does a pretty good job of his story. It doesn't make him a laughingstock. It doesn't make him sort of 100% right at the same time. Like they admit that he's flawed. And I think the show just does a pretty good job, and it's funny because it's an episode that I always think is worse than it actually is. If you're reading the description, you're like, I don't think I want to watch that one. But
it's very enjoyable. I think the you can really tell when the cast is having fun when they do the stuff that isn't just sitting on the bridge and they actually get to do weird holodeck shit. Like. You can clearly tell that Brent Spiner and Patrick Stewart are having fun being dressed like musketeers.
Yeah, Data looks shockingly like Guy Fawkes.
Yeah, yes, he does.
Yeah. It's very frightening.
Although I don't know how much fun Gates McFadden was having sitting in that giant dress on a swing for the entire episode.
And she wasn't even in as Dr. Crusher.
She wasn't
just in that role.
Could Geordi tell at first if that was actually Dr. Crusher or if it was a hologram?
I'd imagine he could, but they didn't make it obvious that he could.
Well, so when he walks in, he checks the little screen outside the holodeck, and you would think that would say like, "Hey, there's one human in here. There's this many fake characters." Like you should be able to look at that screen and know basically who's in there.
Right.
You would think.
Right.
But I don't know if they've like sorted out the rules of how the holodecks work yet.
No, I think Geordi thinks they're real, even though I don't quite understand why he would think that.
But with his visor, if he would have seen immediately that she was just photons and not actually Beverly Crusher.
Although, does the holodeck make it matter? I think that's the implication. Like, it actually because you can get shot in the holodeck.
Right, but
Well, go ahead. I was just wondering. I maybe they've covered this in other episodes. I think this might be the first heavy holodeck one I've done a show for. But can you be killed in the holodeck by?
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's heavy.
They have safety programs that get disabled.
Get drunk?
Yes, I think so. I think everything in the holodeck is real.
Yeah.
There's actually one episode where Riker gets holodeck herpes. No, I made that up. That would be awesome, though.
It's the one with Minuet or what. All of this is like discovered in the first 2 seasons, where every holodeck episode, people are amazed by it, and they walk in and they explain, like, you could die in the holodeck. Be careful. Everything's very dangerous.
Well,
there's even a Futurama that mocks that. But I'm sorry.
Is it really? The thing that I found really interesting about this episode is it kind of predicts online what's the word? Just online interaction.
Like personality, like building a new personality.
Being addicted to online personalities, because he has that line later where he talks about the people that he creates being more real to himself, more real to him than anybody he meets in the real world. Right. And I feel like that's something that's an interesting shot to the literal future that they take.
Yeah. I think it's sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Well, so Barclay plays a big role in Voyager, and I don't think you guys have seen that, but
he's sort of back home, isn't he? He's like their connection.
Yeah. He becomes the main engineer that's responsible for helping to get Voyager home. Spoiler alert. And as they get closer, I know I said it after the fact, but as they get closer, he's able to like project himself onto the ship by streaming himself through a black hole to reach Voyager, and then, even though they're 30 light years away, he's able to somehow communicate with them. And he makes it his mission to start like a Voyager Pathfinder mission or something. And he spends all his time on Voyager, but on a holodeck simulation.
Yep.
And it creeps out the admiral who's in charge, because the admiral's son is on Voyager itself. So he pops in on Barclay, like having fallen asleep in his holodeck quarters. And he's getting too close to the subject in a way, and people around him are like, "You got to take a break, man. This isn't healthy." And a lot of the stuff that Clay is saying is turned up to 11 in that episode.
That's interesting.
He has they continue his addictive personality basically through that's like his running sort of thing. It's I think he's fascinated. They're also kind of ahead of the curve, I feel, with sort of social anxiety.
Yeah,
in a way, like I feel like this episode is pretty impressive in how it manages to cover a bunch of stuff that would come to fruition later on. I think it's pretty insightful in that. I don't know who Sally Caves is. I don't know if that's a pen name for a staff writer. She might just be a spec script writer, but it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I really like this one.
I hear. So let's get into. Actually, I want to talk about the ending before we start getting into that. The ending, to me, is the weakest part of this episode because the last 2 acts are pure technobabble. That means absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things. The ship somehow has gotten contaminated with a chemical that they can't sense from a container that Barclay broke at the start of the episode. It's causing all these malfunctions, and the malfunction basically causes the engine to get stuck, I think. And they start going extremely fast, and the ship is going to fall apart, and then they fix it.
This might also feature the worst command order that Picard has given up to this point, which is to detach the saucer section while going warp 9.
Yeah,
that sounds incredibly dangerous. Not that there's any drag or anything in space, but I don't know. There just seems something really.
They make it seem like it as they're going faster and faster. It's like, oh my god, we're at 9.4, 9.5, and then, but the way the ship works, you wouldn't feel it. It would be like, yep, we're doing 9.8. Right. But it feels like we're sitting still. They don't look out a window.
They kind of amplify it when it goes, when they get like around warp point 9.6, which I guess is like the fastest the ship should go. It starts like shaking. Right. But they have an earlier scene that made no sense where Picard is in his ready room and something like the ship sort of jostles a little bit and Data looks up and Picard comes down and goes report and they go, we increased in speed from warp 7 to warp 7.25. And it's like,
Right.
you guys go from warp 0 to warp 5 in an instant and no one seems to feel anything. Why does this make a difference?
Yeah.
It's like the Richter scale.
Well, on the flip side, I was watching it with my girlfriend, and at some point, when the tension on the ship was supposed to be at its highest, she pointed out that everybody on the bridge seems to be extremely calm. So going super fast, I guess, doesn't really affect you that much.
Same with when they're like, there's 5 minutes until the ship falls apart. Geordi and Barclay walk from engineering to the next place.
You know, I can tell you right now, none of this would have happened if Russell had been there.
I know, I was missing Russell as well. This episode, Russell, if no one's aware, is the character who says nothing in the last episode, but Geordi keeps talking to him. We're not sure if he's a figment of the imagination, but I think this episode did a good job of actually building the ship universe in that they made it actually feel like there's a crew that has meetings when they have problems.
Right.
You deal with there's a lot of engineers that you never see again in this episode.
Yeah, like the morning meeting, the prep meeting around the whatever, and for some reason Wesley's there, and
it's his training.
It kind of humanized, like, oh yeah, I guess they would have warm up meetings, and you
get to actually see Geordi being a commander, like he has a team that he's in charge of, and sort of being Riker being responsible of Geordi's team is like his job, which you don't really see a lot previously.
Yeah. Geordi has peons too.
Right, exactly. Geordi's just middle management, and Riker's coming down hard on him while Picard is seemingly out of touch somewhere else.
You do get some interesting chain of command stuff here.
Yeah,
which is fun. Yeah. I wish O'Brien had a bigger part, but obviously so does O'Brien.
Yep. It's good to see him in any episode.
Also, so again, this is a second episode in a row where when his name comes up in the credits, it's like basically pasted on top of him.
Oh, nice.
And I also noticed this episode seems to be like the third episode I've watched recently that the first scene has Troi in some sort of low-cut dress walking across the camera.
So she was all sexed up in the hologram, holodeck, to be like the goddess of empathy, whatever, but she looked like she's wearing a blue raggedy potato sack. She looked way more attractive in the normal stuff that she wears around the ship.
Right.
Yeah.
She was also
that doesn't fit the holodeck program, Sean.
Yeah, she's also a much less skilled actress when she is not Troi, which is I don't know. I don't feel like piling on her, but she does not do a lot of good work in this. It's both a combination of the script and her. Her goddess of empathy is terrible.
I think this is another episode that could have really done with it being more focused. So, okay, basically, you said it earlier, Wes. I think if they had done a lot of the stuff they did in this episode in Tin Man, I would have liked it a lot more. Mm-hmm. But this is another character or another plot that I think she could have actually been a lot more useful in.
Yes.
Because, if they had pushed his holodeck addiction thing more, then obviously talking to a counselor is going to be, I think there's more. They definitely could have got into the meat of that a little bit more. That stuff is that conversation is going to be had between Troi and Barclay, not Troi and Geordi.
Right. Yeah. You'd get more than they do have the one real counseling scene, which is.
Yeah, but that's played for laughs.
It is. But the script also doesn't make any sense because it's like, at a certain point, she's talking with this guy, right? And she's this empathic counselor, and she can't sense that he's like in love with her, sort of, or at least has like a crush. And she doesn't just not sense this. She makes she's like, let's turn down the lights and I'll sit next to you and you close your eyes. And it's like, how are you not sensing that this is not what this guy needs? And then right after that, what happened to patient-doctor confidentiality in the future? She goes up to Geordi and is like, you're not going to believe what Barclay was telling me in his counseling session.
Good point.
Is this acceptable?
Do you think that can Troi tell when somebody's aroused by her, or does she have the same ability that any girl does, which means they know?
I've never aroused anybody, so I wouldn't be able to tell. I don't.
You would think if she can tell anything, it would be that.
You'd think so, because she's getting multiple signals, right? She's getting like body language and mental gymnastics of whatever people are trying to do.
But if she could sense that people were getting aroused, why would she wear sexier dresses? Just to mess with the crew, mess with her patients?
Probably. She's out there fishing for mental compliments or something like that for her.
Do you think?
Mental compliments.
Do you think that she's ever prescribed medication to any of her patients?
I was
hope
wondering,
not.
Does Barclay need medication?
Well,
No.
that's my thought. In the future, and this is the larger question here, if you have a anxiety disorder, would you just have like quick brain zap to fix it?
Oh, yeah,
or would you
that's a good
take
point.
medication or like
Yeah,
herbal medicine or
you'd beam out that part of his soul and leave him there fine.
But yeah, now you've got me thinking about that scene with Troi now, because you would think that, like, when he gets up and leaves, and then she talks to Geordi, she talks to me like, yeah, I don't know what was going on with that guy. That's your only job.
Right.
Is to know what's going on with that guy when they don't want to tell you what's going on with him. That's literally all you're supposed to do.
She's just like, I don't know. She just shrugs it off. That guy's weird. What do you want?
She's...
Where's my blue dress?
if they're writing up Barclay for substandard performance, I think Troi is second on that list, right? At this point, like, Riker should be reviewing her personnel file. And not in some sexy way. It's some like real nuts and bolts kind of way.
So I had a question. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
I was going to ask if Troi has the ability to override the captain if she feels that he's too mentally unstable, or if Beverly Crusher is the only one that can do that.
Yep. Oh, is that the question?
Yeah. Can Troi?
I don't think there's ever an episode where Troi has to do it. It's always Crusher. I think.
Captain, you were way too roused by me. I'm taking over the ship.
Captain, focus on the Romulans in front of us and out of my cleavage.
Just put on your normal uniform.
It's the return of the turquoise dress in this one for Troi, which is a nice touch. I'm
sorry,
but
what was I going to say?
Oh, I was gonna ask. So the one thing that I couldn't figure out going into the end of the episode, Barclay didn't cause the spill, right? Or did he?
On purpose.
No, well, he didn't do a good job programming the grav lift.
Well, but the grav lift was busted.
Oh, is the grav lift a problem because of the spill?
That's what I thought. Yeah, because he couldn't fix it.
Yeah. I think you're right. So what caused the initial spill?
I think the grav lift was broken, and then when it shattered, it screwed up the grav lift so that they couldn't even figure out how to make a simple fix on it.
Because
I guess
they did film, like, when the thing falls off the hoverboard or whatever, and they show O'Brien and the other guy touching the stuff, like, so they do foreshadow that these guys are going to be the ones spreading it around. But I don't know what caused the. I think Clay's right. At the end of the episode, they're saying the grav lift malfunctioning is a part of this thing that's been going on.
Oh,
which on. It's funny that they mentioned that, because the first thing that I thought when he was, he supposedly fixed it and they were testing it out or whatever, the first thing I thought was, why wouldn't you take those canisters off there before you tested it out, just in case exactly what happens?
Yeah, you know, with the delicate medical supplies or whatever.
I was always really underwhelmed by the design of the cargo bay. I felt it always looks like shit. Those plastic,
it looks terrible.
It does.
Those plastic octagons just stacked on each other. Considering the ship jostles when you accelerate like 0.1 of warp, why would you? We'll just hope they don't tip over. It's fine.
It's kind of a production nightmare because you need a big area, right?
Right.
So, but filling up that big area isn't cost effective.
But I'll bet you that the empty warehouse they built the set in looked like a more convincing area than the one they designed.
I'd imagine, yeah. It's
it's like what they did with Firefly. The cargo bay there was just like a crappy warehouse, rust on the floors, and it just sort of worked. But I don't know. I know they have a limited budget, but it's fun to pick on.
Yeah, it's a really tough thing, I think, to fill up. They're like, more styrofoam blocks over here, guys. Like more circular tubes of like toilet paper over here.
So I grew up on a lake, and when we had put the dock in the water, we would use these large plastic barrels, and it's the same shit that they use in a cargo bay.
That's because they're very efficient.
Apparently, because they last like 500 years into the future. I'll have to tell my dad.
They should just do like they remind me of the Jaws barrels that they shoot into the shark and like to keep tracking them. Yeah, it's that kind of thing.
Yep.
Oh, that'd be good. I wonder. It'd be awesome if there was some kind of link there.
They should have done an episode where Picard harpoons. You could have done like Ahab or something.
We're gonna need a bigger ship.
You could, if you put a captain's log in front of it, you could make that version of Moby Dick he did a few years ago. That could be just a holodeck episode.
Yeah, it should be. There's absolutely no reason why not. But yeah, I mean, so I just want to talk about the ending. They resolved this through a ton of technobabble. I watched it again, and I was just like focusing on it, and nothing they say means anything whatsoever.
Yeah. I did notice that apparently they have a flux capacitor.
Yes, that's a improv mistake. He just flubbed the line.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's awesome that they left it in there though.
Because they call it a flow capacitor earlier in the scene, and then he says flux capacitor. So
it answers a lot of my questions about the technology. Actually,
it makes a lot of sense. It's so I guess what I wanted to we can sort of finish up my the big question I have. So let's go with you, Clay, first. Is what Barclay does in this episode unethical? Where he makes the holodeck. Like replicates people he knows on the holodeck.
Well, I was thinking about that because Riker has the comment about replicating people or whatever, and I mean, as soon as he said that, I was like, no, I 100% agree with him. That you should not be able to do that. You should not be able to replicate crew members on the holodeck for exactly the reasons that he doesn't want people to do it. Because I mean, I don't know. I guess. I just feel like there's something really messed up about that. I mean, like, unless you're doing it for, therapy
or something?
No, not therapy, but like, unless you're doing it for diagnostic purposes, like, you want to run through something, but X, Y, and Z aren't available, so you run a simulation in the holodeck, but you want to make sure that the correct people are there. That makes sense.
Okay.
Like if you're running like a Kobayashi Maru kind of thing or something,
or like a JFK, like solving a mystery where you replicate the people.
Exactly.
Right. But if it's for leisure, you wouldn't be able to use your crewmates.
Yeah, I think you can replicate people who exist. I don't think that's a problem. I just think it's people that you happen to be serving with. I think should probably anybody who's on the crew list of the Enterprise shouldn't be off the replicate list.
Right,
Sean, you agree?
That's interesting. So coming at it from, I think what a lawyer would say is we all own the rights to our likenesses. And you have to sign a release. So when you join the crew, is there a release rights? And does that mean that
That's
other people are allowed to, or is it you're only allowed to use the likenesses of Troi, not for leisure?
It's kind of like in Madden. They don't Bill Belichick exists outside the NFL rights for some reason, so they can never have his likeness as the Patriots coach.
Right.
So yeah, I guess you'd have to sign up if you'd be willing to let.
But if you're a college kid, they can do whatever they want with your likeness.
Exactly. Yeah, they can use your name, and you have no qualms about it. Interesting.
I noticed when he replicated Geordi, with his D'Artagnan outfit, he left the visor on. I thought that was very, a nice touch.
Yeah, he's nothing if not accurate, I guess would be the. See, he
would be watching it and be like, wait a minute, is that the guy from Roots?
Just get him back in there. See, I sort of have the opposite thing. I think my gut instinct is to be like, no, this is terrible. But the more I think about it, I can't think of a good reason why you couldn't do it because it's not really you. Like,
yeah, but there's so many like weird. I don't know.
Let's say, would you say somebody on the ship had this condition where they were just like a psychotic murderer, right? Mm-hmm. But they only killed holodeck creations. Is that unethical to do?
Well, this is the Mortal Kombat. Does Mortal Kombat make you more violent as a video game? Does it actually hurt society to have violent video games? Would be another way to look at this.
Right, but you say this guy, he has like an uncontrollable bloodlust and he must kill something, but his only outlet is the holodeck. Would people have a problem with him just going in and slaughtering people in the holodeck? Because they don't really exist.
You're only allowed to kill Worf's Skeletor people, and that's it.
Yeah. Every night after work, I just go into the holodeck and I kill my mother, and I'm fine the next day.
I mean,
you know what? There would be a loophole. Like, let's say, like, all right, Captain, I'm going to run a simulation. It's just me and Troi, and there's something wrong. And you're like, computer, delete the explosion, and then you just start strangling Troi. I mean, there must be a way around that.
Well, the other interesting thing that's that brings up some questions is like, clearly you're not just replicating the person, you're also tweaking their personality.
Yeah.
Because it's not like the scene that he has with Troi where it's the replication of the counselor's room. It's not like that's just the natural way things would play out. Clearly he's upped the sexy factor.
Right.
On the whatever the thing is that you do that on. Go ahead.
Remember Leah Brahm, the episode where Geordi's trying to fix the ship, and
he mentions it in this episode.
Right.
There you go. So, like, well, when she found out later, she got really upset, and he seemed very apologetic. So there's clearly a line there as far as replicating somebody that actually exists and using their images and their voice and all that.
Yeah, in universe, it seems to become more. It feels more like they wrote this episode, and then in the writers' room after, they're like, people would probably have a bigger problem with this if this was actually going on.
Well, I mean, think about it this way. I mean, like, if you were on the ship and you happened to catch this guy as he was coming out of the holodeck, and you were like, "Oh, hey, what are you doing in there?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah, no, every day after work, I bring up a simulation of you, Wes, and I dress you in a chicken costume with a diaper, and then I slowly stab you with a knife."
See,
how would you feel about that?
Here's the thing. I would say there's something wrong with this guy, but he hasn't done anything wrong. Like, I don't think you can lock that guy up. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think it's a lock-upable offense, but it's just like that's not the kind of headspace you would want your.
That's not the kind of dude I'm going to go bowling with on a Friday night or anything.
But also,
or go to the chicken costume.
Is it the kind of person that you would want to work beside you?
Well, right. No, but I think the problem here is that the holodeck lets you see other people's fantasies, which you can't do in day-to-day. There might be a person who's fantasizing about that, like about me at work in that way, like I'm wearing the chicken costume, and there's no way for them to actually do it.
His name's Brian, and he works in accounting.
So I guess we're saying, is that the holodeck is just a way for other people to see how depraved you are. They're all kind of depraved, but the holodeck just makes it like this physical thing that you can actually look at instead of just them telling you about it.
Well, what's to stop me from writing fan fiction where I kill Clay and then giving that fan fiction to you, Wes, and then you can read it? I mean, you can't legally stop me from fantasizing. Right. And fan fiction, the holodeck is like the ultimate, reality of fan fiction in a way.
Yeah.
Like where would you step in to stop it? Set up some rules that would make people feel more comfortable,
Right.
I guess that's my question. I don't know where I would draw the line about this is acceptable and this is not acceptable to do. And like what I think Barclay's doing in this episode is okay. Like, it's weird, but I wouldn't have the reaction that Riker had. I don't think.
Oh yeah, okay. If you're going by just the stuff that he's doing here, clearly it
just
could be a lot.
Example,
yeah, it could be a lot worse.
Right.
I mean, obviously, the first scene where he's, punching out people in the bar, I can understand that. That's
kind of cool. Yeah, that's what I would do. Yeah, just set it up like that.
But at the same time, though, I mean, there is a level of weirdness to that where if I'm looking at it from the point of view of a person who is in charge of running a group of people, I would probably prefer they don't do that.
Yes.
Yes. just to keep if at the very, very least, to keep everybody else on the ship from being constantly wondering if the guy they're working next to has some weird holodeck murder fantasy or rape fantasy or something weird, about them.
Right. I totally agree with that. I can see, like hashtag Gamergate. This would be their standing point in the future. They'd be like, it's just a game. Like, you do it, whatever. Like, I do think that there's some sort of dividing line here. Mm-hmm, I think it's a really super difficult line to actually figure out what's wrong and what's right, or what's acceptable. I guess.
Well, you could argue that the humans in this are so evolved that they just wouldn't do that. You wouldn't need to set up rules. And Roddenberry's fantasy ship, people are kind of beyond that, and Barclay pushes it further than what most people would do. Even though you and I and Clay, we know what we would do.
Exactly.
But the crew's not like that.
No, well, okay. Look at it from this way too. All right. Instead of looking at it from the point of view of they can do this, but Riker is saying they shouldn't be able to, right? And you're saying, oh, well, I don't know, maybe that, we should talk about that. What would your reaction be if you just got the rules of the ship and one of the rules just happened to be you can't replicate anybody on the ship? Would you go out of your way to be like, oh, that's weird? Or would you just be like, no, that makes sense?
I don't know.
I think I would say that's weird, and I wonder what happened that caused that rule.
Okay.
to be out there. I think I think I probably have a more like liberal sense of replicating the people wouldn't be as weird in my mind. Now,
here's a question.
Sure.
What if you go to the replicator and say, computer, make me a Counselor Troi?
So it actually exists?
Yes.
So she would come out, she'd be crammed out of that little cabinet unit.
Yep.
See, I think that's the difference. Although I don't know what the difference in the technology in the show is. I consider like the clone, because you have a responsibility to the clone where you don't have a responsibility to the holodeck creations because they aren't real.
Yeah. Did they ever do that? Because I feel like if they hired me on that show, that would be the first thing I pitched.
What made a clone?
Actually, trying to use the replicator to replicate a human or a living thing.
I think they have canon rules where it can't replicate some like living organisms or something.
Okay, all right, makes sense.
It can only replicate burned bird meat or whatever Curran calls it in that episode.
No, Rob. Then they phaser the shit out of it. Remember?
I just cooked that sumbitch. Yeah, I just think it's a fascinating little thing, but I think we'll wrap it up here because we've gone on for a long time. So right after this clip, we're going to come back and give our ratings for Hollow Pursuits.
It has been most difficult to reach this decision to leave you. But after thinking about it and discussing it at length with Counselor Troi, I think it's for the best. I just wanted to thank you all for your support.
You'll always be welcome here, Reg.
I know. That's why it's so difficult to leave.
It was a pleasure to serve with you, Mr. Barclay.
Good luck, Reg.
It's been fun. Computer. End program. Erase all programs filed under Reginald Barclay. Accept program 9.
So, guys, on our scale of 1 to 5, 1 being absolute dreck, 5 being an all-time classic. Sean, where are you going to rate this one?
I'm going to put this, I guess, a generous, I think 4 will be good.
Sure.
Just because of what the ideas that it touches on are so big, and Barclay becomes such a big character to the franchise. I think that this is a good intro to a larger theme that the series tackles. And for that reason, I think I'd give it a 4.
Yeah, makes sense. Clay?
I would say not being oblivious to what comes from Barclay later and just judging it on its own. I would say, how do you feel about half points generally?
That's fine.
Because I would probably go 3.5 because I think it's better than an average episode. I think, but I still think the connection between the A plot and the B plot is pretty thin.
Yep.
And I think they could have done a lot more with the holodeck addiction thing.
Yep.
It's tough because I think probably they did it the right way for the time that they made it, because you could get pretty dark pretty fast.
Yes.
And this episode,
I need the HBO version of this episode.
And this episode is pretty light. Like we weren't saying, it's not a comedy episode, but it's like jaunty might be a good word.
It's harmless, I guess.
Yes, yeah. Like the attitude that the swashbucklers have is like the attitude of the whole episode.
Yes, yeah.
And so That being said, I'd say it's a 3.5 because they do introduce an interesting concept that they haven't touched on before. But I wouldn't say they squeezed everything they could have out of it.
Yeah, a 3.5 is good. I'm going to change my answer to that.
Go with a 3.5.
I am going to holodeck murder you later.
I think that I think this episode's pretty strong. I think it's surprisingly strong. It's something that it's probably like an underrated episode to me. Mm-hmm. I never thought at any point that this was a 5, but I was like, up until the last 2 acts, I was like, this is a really strong 4. I think that the ending knocks it down to a weaker 4. I still think I think it's good. I think this is an above average Star Trek Next Generation episode.
Yeah, I would say so.
So I'm going to give it a 4 as my final set. And I think it's interesting that this episode gave us one of the, in all of these that we've done, one of the more interesting sort of discussions that you can have about the ethics of the holodeck, you know?
Yeah.
And I think I have to give it points for that, just on its save.
Yeah, it's become more interesting as time's moved on because we're closer to a holodeck, in reality, in a way,
the
at least
Oculus coming out next year or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, do you guys? I have a question. When at the very end, when Barclay deletes the program, he deletes it except for one part of it. Do you know which part he kept alive?
I don't, but I have a feeling we all know what part he kept alive.
I think it starts. I think it could be. I don't want to be too specific. I think it's D. Troi. Oh no, wait, that's too specific. I'll go with Deanna T. I think it's.
I think it's Wesley eating his pie.
I'd like to think that the director had a lot of just close-up shots of Wesley digging into that pie, and they just had to cut it at the end. They're like, this is
just really get in there, Will. Like use your whole face.
I heard that's just how Will shows up every day, and that's his normal lunch. And they just shot him without him knowing it.
Walked on set.
I'm an idiot.
Although
he didn't know the cameras were rolling, he thought it was a rehearsal.
We can briefly touch on Wheaton is going to leave the series in not very many episodes. It happens in season 4, but he is leaving soon.
Does he get unceremoniously killed by a muck monster?
No, unfortunately, he goes to school, which is a little bit lamer. But
so he's killed by our bad educational system.
That's absolutely right. He's being brought down by the sort of testing scores that teach to nobody and bring the whole country down.
That'll be a good episode to talk about, like, what does he do, that actor, the character in the show, and like because of his close relationship with Roddenberry, now that Roddenberry's not part of it, is that what sort of was there something behind pushing him out or something?
Well, I want to get your. He left because he wasn't happy with the amount of work he was getting, because early in season 1 he was actually involved in really shitty plots, but at least he considered himself involved. And they've made a conscious effort to reduce. This is the most he's probably been in an episode in the whole season.
Wow. Well, in that documentary that Roddenberry's son did, he talks with Will Wheaton about the relationship between Will and Roddenberry, and they were like father and son, which really pissed Roddenberry's real son off.
Wesley is Roddenberry's middle name.
That's right. That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But I thought, like, it's in a way, it's like, oh, it's good, Will Wheaton, that you're protected by the godfather of the show. But as soon as he's not there to protect you, I feel like the powers that be are going to find a way to force you out or send you to Starfleet Academy.
I mean, it's not like Wes is a guest star. He's a main cast member.
Yeah, he's on
at this point.
The credits. Yeah,
it's just fascinating. Like, and I think Chief O'Brien might have more screen time in season 3 than Wesley does.
Well, I think it's tough because I think you can clearly with the new characters that have been added on, like Barclay and O'Brien and Guinan, you can tell that the writers want to go in a different direction.
Yeah, they want to call a mulligan, I think, on some of the characters. Yeah,
but at the same time, I feel like they could have done so much. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like the character of Wesley could have had more potential.
Yep.
But hey, maybe not. I don't know. I mean, I know in writing stuff myself that I started a story one time where these 2 characters, younger kid characters, were the main characters.
Yep.
And on like the third draft, I had pretty much written them out because it was just too hard to always having to figure out what to do with them.
Yes. It seems
Because you've got all these other characters that are much more interesting, but it's like, but you've got these guys who, I mean, do they always just show up, or I don't know what to do with them. So
yeah, I think it's just kids sort of pop up as a instant. If I need drama, a kid would be a good way to go about that.
Right.
It just seems that the drama they produce is never particularly interesting to people.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. I think if Wesley had been the focus of the show, if it had been more of maybe if the focus had been more on what is it like to be a kid on, growing up on a starship.
Yeah.
That obviously that opens a lot more doors of stuff you can do. And I mean, it wouldn't be the same show. It probably would be like a Nickelodeon show or something.
Right. Yeah.
But, that's not the show they were trying to do. And they were interested in different stuff. So obviously you can't, it's not like, well, this week we have Wesley squaring off against Q. It's like, I don't know about that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, some of the best ideas in Next Generation were ideas that were kind of forced on Roddenberry, like the Q. That was kind of forced on him. And when he envisioned the Borg, it was like, they're like bees or something. And they're like, we don't have the budget for that. Let's just tone it down to robots. And that ended up being an amazing idea. And then he insisted on Wesley, and then that did not work out. So it's just funny that the show reached levels of greatness here and there, but a lot of it wasn't a conscious effort by Roddenberry. It was just sort of circumstances forcing his hand,
Yeah, and if you want more of that, check out the Chaos on the Bridge podcast. I'll put a link to it in this episode. But yeah, I totally agree. It's a weird. The show's
I gotta
definitely.
Watch that. I was watching your review of it, and I was like, oh man, I got to get my hands on this. This sounds amazing. I'm wondering as well, like, what will Roddenberry? What is his? What
power.
is?
The answer is power.
He wants power,
right? But now that he's gone long enough, and Trek has sort of died down a bit, and it's evolved, what will his epitaph be? Like, what is he known for? I feel like the truth is kind of out there now.
Yeah.
The truth about his sort of not particularly being the driving force behind these things.
Yeah, and being a bit of a curmudgeon, and having some great ideas at the beginning, and always good with equality. But jerk, shitty father, cheated on his wife, whatever.
Yeah, I personally think that his legacy is pretty firmly cemented at this point. Because even I know all that stuff. But if you were to say Gene Roddenberry, to me, the first thing I would think of is, he created Star Trek. He had this vision of a utopian future.
But I mean, all right. So when you say, George Washington, to me, I get, mostly 9 out of 10 stars. Like, all right, this guy's awesome. He could do no wrong, whatever.
Yeah.
But Roddenberry, I'm like, well, he was a visionary, but the black dots on his career surface pretty quick. I guess that's kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, but that's tough too, though, because obviously I'm not directly comparing him to someone like Edgar Allan Poe or someone, but it's like all of these guys. It's like, he was a genius writer, but it's that stuff isn't usually the stuff that is at the top of the list.
Yeah, I think if I was writing his obituary, it would just be, like visionary. Not a great showrunner. For all
had
of his,
one good idea and did everything he could with it.
Right, did everything he could and then some.
But do you think the average watcher, Star Trek fan, is aware of that?
Yes,
the darker side. Okay,
I think he might actually be hitting a point where it's too negative.
After the documentary that you guys watched, that's kind of what I thought is, wow, this is getting dark now.
I think that, it's tough because I think I've never actually seen an interview with him or like anything he's done, but I feel like it's getting to a point where it's just kind of piling on. And, he wasn't a great showrunner. He wasn't a great creative visionary, but he did have this one good idea that spawned a lot of stuff. And would Next Generation have survived if he had not been there at the start of it?
Right.
Would the studio have pulled the plug on it at that point?
If he had not been there at all?
Right. If the thing like they were saying, like, we need Roddenberry to start this off, if he just refused to do it, would it? That was survive?
Part of the deal. Was they wanted it? They wanted his name on it. Like they needed his approval in order to justify it, or they thought the fans would like turn on them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think his name carried it for those first 2 really shitty seasons. So,
Well, I honestly, so I think the best parallel I can think of is probably Stan Lee, because Stan Lee's name is on everything that Marvel puts out, but Stan Lee hasn't actually done anything at Marvel in like 40 years.
I was seeing this on Reddit, actually. There was like an Explain It Like I'm 5, where they were like, how come Stan Lee gets all the credit for everything when there were a ton of other artists and writers? And the number one response was because Stan Lee shows up at everything. So it's like a lot of the other writers are like reclusive or don't want to do anything, have anything to do with their property at this point. And Stan Lee's just like, yeah, I'll go. I'll do it. I'll be there.
Well, I
He's
think
benefited in large. He gets like $50,000 for convention appearances or something. like
I'm
that.
sure. Yeah. But like that's sort of, I think that's a parallel you can make, because every time you watch anything Star Trek related, usually in the opening credits or very closely at the end of the movie or whatever, it says Star Trek created by Gene Roddenberry.
Yep.
And it's like Batman created by Bob Kane. Bob Kane did not do the lion's share of Batman creating.
Right.
But you know the Bob Kane name just because it's on everything.
Right, yeah.
Right.
So I think it's that kind of thing where I think he's going to be remembered. I think it's going to be one of those things where it's like he's remembered fondly until you do some digging, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. But there's been documentaries on him, and there isn't a whole lot of negative stuff about Stan Lee.
No,
yeah, I guess I shouldn't have said Stanley. I think Bob Kane is a more apt comparison because I think they were very similar.
Yeah,
right.
I think it is about just branding yourself onto something where the culture, the sort of the population that's not really into that thing assumes that you had a bigger role to play in it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Like you become the popular sort of idea of what the head of the state is, or something like that.
I don't know if this totally lines up, but I just watched this documentary about a session musician group called the Wrecking Crew, who played on pretty much every album between like 1965 or 1960 and 1970 or something like that.
Yep.
And
Motown, or were they just everything?
No, it was everything. They did the all the Beach Boys stuff. They did like pretty much every hit album these guys were playing on it.
Yep.
And they even did the guitar player is the guy who plays the guitar line in Batman, the 60s Batman theme.
Oh, right.
So these guys were on everything.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it got to a point where at first the artists whose album these guys were playing on would be mad because they obviously wanted to play their own stuff, but then they would come in and see how good these guys were and say, no, okay, you guys can do this.
Yep.
And then when the Monkees came around,
the Monkees.
No, listen, it's really fascinating because the Monkees got a ton of shit because they weren't writing their own stuff. They weren't playing their own stuff on the albums. And they were talking to some of these session musicians, and one of them was like, yeah, I don't know why they got so much crap about this stuff because all of these other guys were doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
They just didn't get called out on it because they didn't want everybody to know that they were just as false in their recordings as the Monkees were.
Wow.
It's my favorite joke from Wayne's World 2, I think, with Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne is like, he's told his band or something is on tour with somebody, is on tour with the Monkees as like a way to get on stage or something. He's like, the fucking Monkees. just tickles my fancy. Great Ozzy delivery. Anyway, I'm gonna call it here for a day. We've gone on for a good time. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. If you enjoyed the content, you're on YouTube, a like and a comment's appreciated. You're on iTunes, rating, review helps get the show out there. Sean, Clay, thank you very much for coming on.
Anytime.
Thanks,
We had a good discussion, I think, here about the ethics of Holodeck, and I look forward to publishing this in Science as our journal discovery. Anyway, thanks, guys, and I will be back next time with, what the hell is after Hollow Pursuits? The Most Toys. The one where Data almost kills somebody, maybe.
Oh, he's a collectible.
Yep, he's a collectible. Yeah.
You know, that would be another good one to play tonight, just because we're in that nerd verse as well.
Yeah, it's the collector episode, so I'm going to put this up Sunday. So yeah, if you guys are down for that, we can do that again. We'll do it next week or something. But in the meantime, guys, I will see you all later.